right now, I don't think is a coincidence. Yesterday, the House Judiciary Committee was working on what they call the markup of the articles of impeachment that ostensibly, if they passed, the Judiciary Committee would go to the full floor of the House. Basically what it is, people are offering amendments, and then they vote on all the amendments. They strike it down. They basically get to, through a process, to write in this instance, the articles of impeachment, functionally a bill. And the Republicans were trying to add amendments that would narrow and mitigate the impeachment. Democrats were writing ones that would expand it and whatnot. In the end, this went on for 14 hours yesterday. I think it started at 9 a.m. And around 11 o'clock at night last night, Republicans were anticipating taking a vote. And you know what they would be saying right now. They took a vote in the middle of the night to perform a coup against this president. And to the credit of the Democrats, Jerry Nadler just out of the blue said, okay, we're about to take a vote. Recess. Let's do this in the morning. Which, frankly, I think was both politically and civically appropriate. You shouldn't have a vote to impeach a president or pass articles of impeachment to the House at 11:30 at night. You should do it at a time where people can watch, the news can digest it, and whatnot. And that's what they did. Republicans were furious because they had all of their narratives are like done in the dead of the night. They probably had charts. They probably had graphics that they had already made. And they were pissed about that because printing costs can really go through the roof, particularly if it's like a multicolored thing. Anyways, here is the vote on the abuse of power. They had 2 votes this morning. They convened at 10 a.m. We did it live. It lasted about 15, 20 minutes maybe. They voted on 2 articles of impeachment. One is abuse of power. One is obstruction of Congress. Let's just play the first one because this is, like I say, fairly historic. You will also watch Louie Gohmert do a little grandstanding, which is always fun.
The question now is on Article 1 of the resolution, impeaching President Donald J. Trump for abusing his powers. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Nadler?
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Aye.
Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Ms. Jackson-Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson-Lee votes aye. Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Johnson of Georgia?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes aye. Mr. Deutsch?
Aye.
Mr. Deutsch votes aye. Ms. Bass?
Aye.
Ms. Bass votes aye. Mr. Richmond?
Yes.
Mr. Richmond votes yes. Mr. Jeffries?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries votes aye. Mr. Cicilline?
Aye.
Mr. Cicilline votes aye. Mr. Swalwell?
Aye.
Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Ms. Jayapal?
Aye.
Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Ms. Demings?
Aye.
Ms. Demings votes aye. Mr. Correa?
Yes.
Mr. Correa votes yes. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia votes aye. Mr. Neguse?
Aye.
Mr. Neguse votes aye. Ms. McBath?
Aye.
Ms. McBath votes aye. Mr. Stanton?
Aye.
Mr. Stanton votes aye. Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Dean votes aye. Ms. McCarcel-Powell?
Aye.
Ms. McCarcel-Powell votes aye. Ms. Escobar?
Aye.
Ms. Escobar votes aye. Mr. Collins?
No.
Mr. Collins votes no. Mr. Sensenbrenner?
No.
Mr. Sensenbrenner votes no. Mr. Shabbat?
No.
Mr. Shabbat votes no. Mr. Gohmert?
My vote is no.
Mr. Gohmert votes no. Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Buck?
No.
Mr. Buck votes no. Mr. Radcliffe? Mr. Radcliffe votes no. Miss Roby? Miss Roby votes no.
Miss Roby,
Mr.
I think,
Gates?
No.
brought her
Mr. Gates
grandson
votes no.
in, or maybe
Mr.
Gates
Johnson
did.
of Louisiana?
No.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes no. Mr. Biggs?
No.
Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock?
No.
Mr. McClintock votes no. Miss Lesko?
No.
Miss Lesko votes no. Mr. Reschenthaler?
No.
Mr. Reschenthaler votes no. Mr. Klein?
No.
Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Armstrong?
No.
Mr. Armstrong votes no. Mr. Stubbe?
No.
Mr. Stubbe votes no.
Has every member voted who wishes to vote?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask
Clerk
how
Gohmert.
I'm recorded?
How is
Mr.
the gentleman recorded?
Mr. Gohmert, you are recorded as no.
Yeah, I want to make sure.
Clerk will report.
There you go. And the 23 to 17, there's Gohmert. I just want to make sure that I'm the last person.
Yeah, because he didn't
Camera
say it
side.
loud enough the first time.
Right.
Yeah, and he can't count his colleagues.
Right, exactly.
Those first few really use the same tone of voice you use when like your pet jumps up on the furniture or something. Like, no.
Well, look, this is a piece of history, and they also are all trying to be there's a lot of theater to this, of course, as there is with all politics, and they are playing to a specific audience, and they each, Sensenbrenner's trying his, like, I'm just sick of this thing look. And they're all also, I think, genuinely bummed that this happened in the daytime because it really did cut into, like, how disgusting is it that they had this vote at 10 a.m. right in the fun part of the Today Show. But there it is. This will move to the House for a full vote. And of course, there was a second vote, similar results, 23 to 17. The only other thing that I was struck by when you see this vote, the incredible, everyone knows this, but it's just sort of weird to see it laid out like this. The incredible lack of diversity that exists in the Republican Party. It is really just ranges from, bald, old, white guy to, like, to younger white guy, to fat white guy, to skinny white guy. And then, to be fair, I think there were two white women on the judiciary for the Republicans. So that's a step in the right direction for them.
Progress.
But when you compare it to the Democratic side, it's stunning. It really is. You understand everything you need to know, I think, about politics, at least in Washington, and in terms of just the political parties, in terms of the major dynamic, which is not to say that dynamic is helpful, but it is the case. They are a white party, and perhaps just a white male party on some level as well. So there it is. Impeachment will go forward. Meanwhile, we will get to this. Michael's out sick today.